Buddy, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Line of Scrimmage. I'm your host, Ryan Neff, and I'm Ryan Neff, and it's great to be with everybody tonight. Such a jam packed college football slate last week, and it didn't disappoint. I told everybody that I was going to watch the Washington State Oregon State game. That's the game that piqued my interest the most. We had a great tussle between Notre Dame and Ohio State. Penn State blows out Iowa. So, going to do a little recap of last week, highlight some games, get into the top 25 picks this week, and then we'll do the against the spread picks. So, again, I'm Ryan Neff. Hopefully, Lloyd Vance will join me a little later. And this is the Line of Scrimmage, my friends. And I also have to thank my esteemed producer, Angel John Scott Martinez, does such a fantastic job behind the scenes for this particular show, and also NFL insider Lloyd Vance on that show that he did yesterday. And he just comes up with new ways of like interjecting stuff. So, and again, thanks to Angel behind the scenes. So I'm just going to delve into it right away. Some of the games I highlighted from last week: we had Florida State against Clemson. Van Lloyd and I said last week, if you want to beat a dog, you got to beat the big dog. And Florida State, they got down early. You thought, here we go again. Clemson's going to win another one. This is going to propel Clemson to a great season. And unfortunately, Clemson took the foot off the gas a little bit. Some horrible clock management on their part. Some other mistakes that you normally don't see a Dabo Swinney coach team make. Florida State pulls it out in overtime, 31-24. The thing that, when you look at this game, Florida State ran the ball 20 times for 22 yards, and they still won the football game. Jordan Travis had a decent game, 21 to 37 for 289 yards, 2 touchdowns. He spread the ball around a lot. Again, 289 passing yards. But when you look on the opposite side of the equation, K. Klubnik, pedestrian, 25 of 38. You normally don't see Clemson throwing it up 38 times a game. 283 yards and a touchdown. They ran the ball 41 times for 146 yards. And normally when you run it that much and you control the clock, then you should be able to win the football game. But unfortunately, Klubnik with the pick, it was a pick six, and that sort of turned the tide in this particular football game. So Florida State, now I believe they have arrived. Are they back? Right now they are. We'll have to see what happens the rest of the season. And on the other side, I put out on Twitter X, whatever the hell they call it now, I put on there that this is the first chink in the armor for Dabo Swinney's program. They're in trouble. The recruiting has tailed off the last couple years, it shows. And LV in the house joining me. LV, I was just saying about the Florida State Clemson game. Clemson, if you look at it on paper, won the football game, but unfortunately, Klubnik with the pick six, that sort of like turned it around in Florida State's favor. Clemson with horrible clock management toward the end of the game. Florida State had all the momentum, and once it went into overtime, you just had a feeling that Florida State was going to win the football game. I mean, Clemson ran it 41 times for 106 yards, and when you control the game like that with the run, you normally win the football game, but they just, when they got up 17-7 and then the pick six, it just like turned the tide of the game.
Yeah, it was, we had so many close games, and it was a situation where, you know, they just couldn't get it done. Dabo had the magic for all those years with Watson and Hunter Renfro and all those guys, and like as you said, they're not getting the recruits that they used to, and it's just not the destination place, and he's going to have a lot of work to do to compete with the SEC and um, even in the ACC. There's some teams that are coming back. Look at Miami. They're always mining their area down there, and Clemson. I remember coming when I was coming up. Yeah, it was a cool place to have a football game, but a lot of top recruits just did not want to be there. So we'll see how they are able to turn around. And it was a great week, though, in terms of close games. And that was another one of those games that was like, wow, I better not walk away from the TV set until then.
Yeah, and again, Florida State, seems to be back this year at least, and they seem to have turned the page as far as gaining that momentum. And Clemson out of the ACC picture, they're obviously out of the national title picture, and we'll see. One program's going like this, and the other one's going like this, and we might see the changing of the guard. So, next game I had highlighted was obviously Ohio State Notre Dame. Wow, I mean, Ohio State's defense came to play. Both defenses came to play. You sort of figured that this was a game as the game went along. Whoever had the ball last was probably going to win the football game. And, on paper, equally matched. When you look at the game stats, there was just mirror images of one another. Um, you know, I there was really nothing to be excited about other than the defense. So I mean, if you like defensive football, this was the game to watch. I was waiting for Notre Dame to make that stop in the end. I kept saying to myself, they've got this, they've got this, they've got this. But Ohio State, young quarterback, puts together a drive like that. They punch it in with no time left, and if anybody caught it, Notre Dame defensively, the last two plays of the game, they only had 10 defensive guys on the field. I don't know how
Wow.
that happens. Yeah. So, again, Ohio State surprises me. They've been in situations like this before. Notre Dame, not really. So, it showed with the effort that, Ohio State heard all the noise. Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame. But Ohio State, again, comes out with a 3-point win.
Yeah, and they stopped it when it mattered most. And this is, I always look at the quarterbacks. Obviously, everybody says I concentrate on too much, but Hartman was solid. He not spectacular. He was very steady. It was a home game, electric atmosphere. You had the home dog, Notre Dame, and I think game day was there, and everybody was talking about this matchup and how it would turn out. As you said, very close game, and Hartman was making some nice throws early on. Despite the pressure from Ohio State. But what I took from this game is Ohio State looks vulnerable. They're not the machine that they was the last couple of years, and I watched McCord since he was at St. Joe's Prep in the area where I am, and I'm outside of Philadelphia, and I saw a lot of his high school games. Nondescript quarterback. He's got a lot of work to do, and they kind of won in spite of him. Bad reads, was not getting the ball out of his hand, and I could see Marvin Harrison Jr. was getting frustrated. Whether it was they were bracketing him a lot in coverage and trying to make sure he didn't get the ball, but also McCord was just late on a lot of his throws to him, and he has two, I'll say top 20 receivers probably in this year's NFL draft, and you would expect more from that offense. So a good win for Ohio State, but I felt like they survived, and I think there was, if I remember, there was a key flag on that last drive too that helped keep it going, and it kind of ticky tack. Some people are saying shouldn't have been thrown, not thrown, but they get the job done, and Ohio State gets the W. I didn't like the way McCord was jumping around and beating his chest like he was the reason they got it done.
Right. The stat that really glared out to me when I went back and took a look at it is Notre Dame was 5 of 10 on third downs, and Ohio State was 10 of 17. So you're converting third downs like that. Notre Dame won the time of possession, 35 minutes to 25. But again, when you've been in these particular situations before over the years, you know what to do. Notre Dame just trying to get back to that point, and it kind of showed. So the next game I had highlighted, let me get to it here. Talk about another defensive game. and Lloyd talked about close games, Utah and UCLA. And if anybody tuned into this, this was just one of those. I said on last week's show, Kyle Whittingham, what does he do? This team takes on his identity. They played, snot nosed defense. They were well balanced offensively. You're going to be in a battle with them. They completely shut UCLA down. And UCLA's defense showed up too. It wasn't like Utah did anything spectacular, but UCLA rushing wise for the game, and this is how dominant the Utah defense can be. UCLA ran it 32 times for 9 yards. So
Wow.
when you can't run the football and you're forced to throw, you know, Nate Johnson for Utah, nothing special, 9 of 17, one touchdown. They ran it 40. This was a defensive battle to the tilt. And normally when it's a defensive battle like this, Utah normally comes on top. They're the reigning two-time conference championships back-to-back for a reason, and it's because of that defense.
Yeah, and they as you said, they know their identity. So they have a backup quarterback, and he's playing within himself. He's not turning the football over. He's keeping the chains moving, leaning on that running game, and that defense is very stout. Everybody always talks about, yeah, they may not have any big time draft picks on that defense, but those guys that Whittingham has them flying around to the football, and they're making tackles, and then conversely, UCLA, hate to say it, same old Chip. He's trying. He wants to be the high scoring guy and all that. And why not try to just get physical with the team and get a W on the road? That's a tough environment to play in. And UCLA, it's always interesting with them. We always want to see, okay, how they're going to do with USC at the end of the year and everything. But it was a winnable game, but UCLA could not get it done. And that they're another team, much like Clemson. They were in the mix, in the early days with Terry Donahue, and they had some really quality teams, and Troy Aikman and Ken Norton Jr. and all those guys, but they just have not been able to get back to those glory days.
Yeah, so I mean Utah, they're saying hello. Everybody's talking about Oregon, Washington, USC, and they're over here like, you guys just keep talking about them. We're just going to continue to do what we do, and it continues to work. Now, on the flip side of that, if you liked offense, Arkansas, LSU, I know Arkansas wasn't ranked, but I said last week, watch out for Arkansas. And LSU, boy, they did everything to not win the football game. They wind up winning by a field goal. Jaden Daniels, spectacular, 20 of 29, 320 yards, 4 touchdowns, a pick. They ran the ball 29 times, 189 yards, and KJ Jefferson, the Arkansas quarterback, decent day. He did have the 2 picks, unfortunately, but this was like another one of those battles where, I thought maybe LSU had turned a corner. I thought they had things figured out defensively. Normally, when you think LSU, you think defense, and Arkansas pushed them to the brink.
Yeah, and this was a rivalry game, like I highlighted. I knew this was going to be tough, and every year these teams seem to play a black and blue special, and LSU glad to survive. They weren't home though, and you do expect more. They're DBU, so you expect their defensive backfield not to get pushed around like the way they were in this game, and they get the win, but there's some foreshadowing things with them. You wonder, okay, once they play Georgia and even Ole Miss, some of these teams at SEC, they may have some problems with them, and we'll see how they are. Orgeron obviously left, and we have to see what was it, Brian O'Neill's their coach, and we'll see if he's, he thought he brought something from Notre Dame, but right now he's underachieving, and he's not getting recruits, and we all know it's all about recruiting in college football, and they're just not rolling the LSU name out there, and people like Odell Beckham Jr. are just not flocking to that school like they used to. So, good win for them. They got to move on to the next one, like Bill Belichick always says, but, definitely some things they have to work on this week.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they want to compete with some of the opponents that they have later on down the line. So, the next game highlighted, and we talked about this last week, LV. if you can't catch Alabama this year, then you're probably never going to be able to catch them. Ole Miss, Alabama. I picked Ole Miss, but again, it's the same old thing. Alabama's been in these types. You think you have Alabama down, people not talking about them, and Lane, what are you doing? So they ran the ball 29 times for only 56 yards, and that was sort of the telltale sign for me. Jackson Dart didn't have a great game. 20 to 35, 244 yards, no touchdowns and a pick. They looked confused. They didn't look comfortable. Now, Alabama didn't do anything spectacular, but the defense showed up and they showed out. Um, Jalen Milroe, pedestrian, 17 to 21, 225, a touchdown and a pick. But Alabama kept it on the ground. 45 rushes, 131 yards. Yeah, it was only a 2.9 average, but you rush it that many times, you wear their defense down, and when the other team can't sustain drives, you're going to lose the football game. So Alabama again, and I've said this over and over, and I said it last week. If you can't catch them this year, you're probably not going to catch them.
Yeah, and and their coach probably everybody's pointing to him. He may want to spend more time with the family and retire. We'll see if that ends up happening. But Milrow, he did better this week. He was not turning the football over. He looked solid, and they're going to need him to uh, just make sure he's protecting the football and then lean on all the weapons around him. And then that defense, led by Kool-Aid, McKinstry, they can be dominant at times, and they confused Ole Miss, and they got the timely turnover and protected the ball. They still have a very good running game in Alabama. I think we're still going to. They may not be in a national championship conversation, but it's going to be fun to watch them as teams get up for them every week, and they definitely want to, you know, say, we beat them, and then of course the Iron Bowl is always waiting at the end of the season. So there's a lot of bigger games for them and a good win for them, and then they have to keep it moving forward.
And the final game before we get to the top 25 schedule this week was I told everybody it was going to be a hell of a game. Washington State and Oregon State. Now I picked Oregon State because I thought their defense was going to show up and show out. They didn't. You want a defense in this game? Forget it. It was nowhere to be seen. Washington State built a huge lead. Of course, Oregon State fought back. They win 38-35. Washington State. I mean, we now, other than that Michael Penix Jr., we now need to start talking about Cam Ward as an outside, maybe Heisman, hopeful. 28 of 34, 404 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions. He did not turn the ball over. They ran an okay 30 times for 106 yards. Oregon State, I mean, they pounded the rock 39 times for 242 yards. DJ had again pedestrian game, 17 to 34, a touchdown and a pick. But again, Oregon State was going to try and win this football game, pounding the rock, and they did. I don't know what you think, LV, but DJ, he still looks like a confused quarterback. No matter if he's at Clemson or Oregon State, you're waiting for this kid to break out at some point and have consistency, and he shows flashes, but then he disappears.
Yeah, and he looks the part, but you have to start wondering, okay, is he really going to be able to get this done in college? Obviously, it's his second stop. I remember watching him in high school. He was on that Netflix high school show, and I watched him as a quarterback there, and he has all the size, and everybody talks about the measurables, but he just doesn't make good decisions, and he does look kind of robotic at times. He doesn't look comfortable in the pocket and not able to get away from pressure. So, we'll see if he's able to kind of mature and get better there. At Oregon State, obviously, that's a good spot for him. It's kind of out of the way, and everybody will always say, okay, he's not as much under the spotlight as he was in Clemson. But you do have to tip your cap to Washington State. I said Pullman's a tough place to play, man, and their crowd gets into it. They're a home dog, and they're a dangerous team. And You talk about the Pac-12. Pac-12 is represented right now. They have in terms of they have 6 teams in the top 25. So each week you better be ready and get at it because yes, this conference is probably going away and these teams are going to all spread out. But for this season, there's some great competition there. Ryan, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
What about now? Sorry about that. So let's get into the top 25 this week. We've got Nevada at 25, Fresno State. Nevada, not a real good football team right now. The program's sort of falling on a little bit of a hard time. Fresno State, one of those sneaky teams, very well balanced, very well coached. They do everything well, special teams, offense, defense. I think Nevada's in for a rough night, and I think Fresno State LV they'll probably handle Nevada with no problem.
Yeah, I think they will. They're a mid-major, but they aren't a top 25 in Fresno State. They've always had some very good skill position players. The Carr brothers both came out of there, and their quarterback this year looks like he's able to do some things. So it should be a game that they should be able to handle Nevada and then kind of keep moving forward and then kind of get ready for bowl season. So maybe they can make their resume look pretty, but I don't know if they'll be able to get high enough to get into the big dance. But I think they will get in a bowl game where they'll face a team from a bigger conference, and then we'll really see, okay, how good is this team?
Yeah, they're going to have a lot go right, and they'll probably have to try and go undefeated for them to sniff maybe a
Yeah.
New Year's bowl. Then we have number 23, Mizzou at Vandy. Again, Mizzou is just year in and year out. They always seem to win a big game, and it sort of propels them to a decent season. They're going to Vanderbilt, they're just awful. There's no other way to put it. I mean, Kentucky just spanked them, took them behind the woodshed last week, and again, it's the same old story with Vandy. I don't think Missouri will have a problem. I know it's on the road, but Missouri just has the better team. They're much more talented, and I just don't see Vandy putting up much of a fight. I think Missouri goes in there and they roll.
Yeah, I think they will too. Right now, Missouri is a 13.5 road favorite in this one, and I would think they would cover us because Vanderbilt typically they just don't have the horses there, and they can always point to academics and everything that they don't take. They only take certain types of players. I know Shermer's son was there at the quarterback position, and I just think Missouri comes in there and does blow the doors off them. Missouri is also another top 25 team everybody's talking about in the lower part of the SEC, but with their team, they always have a very good defense and a timely run game. So I think they go in there and take care of business. And unfortunately, Vanderbilt, maybe next year.
Getting ready for basketball season or baseball season in spring.
Right.
So then we have number 22, Florida, going to Kentucky. Wildcats are favored by a point at home.
Wow.
Yeah. So Kentucky undefeated, 4-0. Florida's 3-1. We know what happened a couple years ago when Kentucky went into Gainesville and beat that Mullen squad. And you know what, LV? For as big of a win as Florida had against Tennessee when they played Charlotte last week, they didn't look good at all. I think they were feeling themselves a little bit after the Tennessee win, and I expected a blowout. I thought they'd blow out Charlotte. Kentucky blew out Vanderbilt, what they were supposed to do. I am a Florida Gator fan, as you can see, but Florida just is not. They're just too inconsistent. They got up for Tennessee, they got down for Charlotte. Are they going to get up for Kentucky? It's a noon kickoff, so I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I just think Kentucky's a little bit more talented than Florida right now
Wow.
at this particular juncture. So I think Florida will put up a fight. I think it will be nip and tuck the whole way, but I just think somehow, some way, Kentucky finds the W.
Interesting. And yeah, as you said, Florida's getting 1 point. So it's almost like a pick 'em game. So it's going to be who turns the football over, and I just think in the end, Florida just they got that pedigree. So I think Kentucky, they'll probably find a way to lose this game. It'll probably be close. Florida will probably win it by a field goal, and it'll probably end up being one of those situations where you have a pick six or a kickoff or something that turns it for Florida in their favor. So I'll go Florida, but it's going to probably be a very close game. That's always a tough trip for them going to Lexington. I had a friend that went to Florida and then they traveled to the game to Kentucky, and they said it's a bigger rivalry than people think. So, you know, I think they'll be ready on the road, and then Florida starts looking down the line to some bigger games later in the season.
I hope you're correct, my friend. I hope you are correct. Um, and we have number 21 Tennessee hosting South Carolina. Tennessee, it looks like they're 11.5 point favorites at home. We know, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't South Carolina beat Tennessee last year? If was it? Maybe it
Yeah,
was.
I
Yeah.
think that was one of the comeback wins at the end of the season. Yep.
Um, Tennessee 3-1, South Carolina 2-2. Don't really know how good Tennessee is yet. They lost to Florida. They bounced back with a win last week. South Carolina, took Georgia to the tilt. Um, and again, I don't really know how good South Carolina is either. But on paper, you would think that Tennessee right now is the better football team. I think this will be closer than an 11.5 spread. I think South Carolina comes to battle. I think they'll battle them into the fourth quarter. But, again, quarterback position with South Carolina, he's always up and down. He's up and down, So, Tennessee, give me the stability with Tennessee at home. I don't think Tennessee will cover, but I think Tennessee will probably win the football game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. One a Rocky Top, and you have Milton, who needs to prove himself as a Tennessee quarterback in these big spots, and we'll see if he's able to step forward. Obviously, South Carolina, they have Spencer Rattler, a guy who I've followed since he was in high school, and coming over from Oklahoma. Yes, he has all the intangibles. He can spin the football. He has looked like a top 10 pick at certain times, and then at other times you're like, oh man, this guy's gonna be a sixth rounder. So this is a chance for him to go in there and establish himself. We know Tennessee is vulnerable after losing last week, but I think this is going to be a closer game than that 12 points that you talked about. Tennessee is a 12-point favorite, but I think if I was betting this, I would take South Carolina in the points. But I think Tennessee will find a way to win this one, probably by like a touchdown or so. So expect another close game because it's SEC and probably a defensive battle with some running.
Yeah, I think Tennessee will probably win it in the fourth quarter. It'll come down to the fourth quarter, obviously. Number 14, Oklahoma is hosting Iowa State. Oklahoma didn't look good last week against Cincinnati either. They were on the road. I expected them to put forth a fantastic effort and blow them out. They didn't do it. How good is the 4-0? I don't know. They struggled against SMU. They struggled against Cincinnati, and then the other two games they blew their opponent out. And Iowa State again is one of those programs where they're 6-6, 7-5, 5-7, somewhere in there, and Iowa State will come to battle, but Iowa State always loses these particular types of games. So Oklahoma at home, Oklahoma's favored by 20. Based on what I've seen against SMU and what I've seen against Cincinnati, I don't. That's too big of a number for me.
Yeah.
I don't think Oklahoma's going to cover. I think Iowa State will come to play, but I just think Oklahoma at home, better football team. They know they have to keep pace with Texas, so they're not going to cover the spread, but Oklahoma wins the football game. I'll say by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, so Oklahoma's got to get ready for the Red River shootout. And this is a game where they need to take care of business at home. Dylan Gabriel, to me, still does not look 100% healthy. He came from Central Florida, was a little beat up, and then he transferred. And We'll see how he does. But I like what you're saying in terms of Iowa State. They always come to play. The Cyclones are a dangerous team. They can run the football. Their offensive line is usually better than most people think, and they usually get timely turnovers. So if Oklahoma, this could be a letdown spot if they look like they did early in that Cincinnati game where they kind of woke up and got the job done. So, but I still think that Oklahoma will pull this one out. I do agree that that 21 or 20-21 spread is just too much to overcome. I would probably take Iowa State and the points in this one, but I think Oklahoma wins it, and then they try to keep moving towards like a Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean they have to just keep that Texas game way in the distance because
Yeah.
and again, it's style points. You can't be struggling against Cincinnati on the road. It's not going to float with voters. So next game that I have on here, number 13 LSU is going to Ole Miss. LSU favored by 2.5 on the road right now. This is a 6 p.m. game. Um, again, LSU took them everything to win it at home against Arkansas. Ole Miss don't look good against Alabama. You don't know where the psyches are going to be with both teams. This to me right now is a put up or shut up. So um, you get this kind of win, and it may propel you to better things down the road. Um, Jaden Daniels, Jackson Dart. I think it comes down to the quarterback play. There's probably going to be a lot of points scored. I think it'll probably be a up and down kind of game. But I'll take Jaden Daniels. Jackson Dart for me is too inconsistent. He's too all over the place. Again, this is going to be another close game. So LSU, I'm going to say they'll probably cover. I'm going to say they're going to win by a touchdown.
Yeah, and I think the Dart will make some mistakes, and that LSU defense will capitalize on it, maybe a pick six or something like that. And you know, LSU, this is a tough spot for Jaden Daniels. He's got to go in there and play well. And Oxnard, Mississippi is another tough place to play, and Kiffin will have those guys ready to roll, and it's going to be electric atmosphere. But I think LSU will find a way to win this one, and they'll also probably be able to cover that 2.5 point spread. So it should be a good game. Both teams are in the top 25, and we'll see which one turns out. But I think it'll be LSU in this one.
Yeah, I mean the Grove at night, at Ole Miss. Ole Miss will come to bat. They have to after that performance last week. So they know they better come to battle or they are going to lose again. So they don't want to repeat performance from last week. Then we have number 12 Alabama at Mississippi State. Mississippi State just looks lost. Um, they just don't look good. If anybody watched the Mississippi State South Carolina game, they just look confused. They look defeated. Um, Now Alabama, they won 24-7 against Ole Miss. Again, Saban had them ready. The defense played exponentially better. Offense still a work in progress. Um, I don't even know. Let me see what the spread is on this particular football game. We have Alabama probably favored, and they are favored by 14 and a half. Yes, it's at Mississippi State, but I think this will be a real get right game for Alabama. I think they put it all together this week. Like I said, Mississippi State just doesn't have anything for them. Yes, it's an SEC game. SEC games are tough, but I just don't like what I'm seeing out of Mississippi State right now. And I think Alabama's defense comes to play for a second week in a row. I think they cover the 14 and a half, so I'm going to say Alabama probably wins this game big.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you. I think that Saban wants to reestablish this team and get Milrow going and make sure everybody knows, hey, look, we may have a defeat, but we still can get in the national championship conversation. And Mississippi State, as you said, the last couple of years, the Bulldogs have just been kind of down, and they just have not brought a lot to the table. So I think Alabama tries to, get right and beat up on MSU, and they kind of just keep moving forward in their season. But there's some tougher games to come from Alabama, and definitely they got to get better quarterback play from Milrow, and that offensive line's got to do a better job protecting them.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to see is Alabama run the hell out of the football this week as well. just like they sort of did last week. So, um, but we'll see. Stranger things have happened, but I just don't see Mississippi State hanging. Then we have number 11 Notre Dame at number 17 Duke. Notre Dame favored by 6 on the road. Uh, it's kind of surprising to me, but they're giving Duke a lot of respect. You've got Notre Dame coming off the emotional loss to Ohio State. Duke's undefeated. Duke's still in the conversation for possible ACC championship if they can do some damage. So this is a tough game to get a read on, to be quite honest with you, because I think Duke is a good football team. I don't know what Notre Dame's psyche is going to be coming off that loss. Can they get back up emotionally for Duke? This is a late kickoff again for Notre Dame. It's 7:30 at night. Um, Duke's going to be rocking, but in the end, I just think Notre Dame will probably try and find. They will find a way to win this football game. They have to get right after that loss last week. They only have one loss. They can still get into the national championship conversation if they run the table. This is the first part of that equation. Do I think they cover the 6? Probably, but Duke is going to be tough. This is a tough out, and I say Notre Dame wins the game. This is like a 30-20 type game for me.
Gotcha. First of all, it is a no basketball game. You know what I mean? So Duke, Duke they're trying to establish themselves as a football power now, and this is their opportunity to step forward. But I do think that Notre Dame will be ready. Freeman's going to be upset, and he's still kind of complaining about the way that game ended against Ohio State, and he's going to have these guys mad and angry to play. And Hartman is going back in ACC country. Don't forget he originally from Wake Forest, so he knows Duke very well, and this is his opportunity to kind of show them, hey, maybe you missed out on them, and it's going to be a fun watch. I think in the end you're going to see Notre Dame win this one, and it's going to be their opportunity, as you said, to kind of jump back into the national conversation after a tough loss to Ohio State. So I definitely think that Notre Dame will win out.
Yeah, I mean Duke just they haven't been in these types of situations enough for me to pick them. Um, I just think Notre Dame picks themselves back up and just again they're not going to blow them out by any means, but I do think they win the football game. Next game we got number 10 Utah at number 19 Oregon State. Now this is a Friday night game, 9 o'clock Pacific Coast time. Oregon State is actually favored by 3 at home. Somebody knows something somewhere that I don't. So, um, but I'll tell you what, LV, just that Utah defense had Oregon State beaten Washington State last week, then I would have picked Oregon State in this particular football game. But watching Utah against UCLA, watching the way that defense has performed, not only at home, but they've taken that defense on the road, and they've been dominant. Again, Oregon State, you lose a heartbreaker like that to Washington State, you lose by a field goal, you battle back. How much did that take out of them? This is going to be another slobber knocker as far as I'm concerned because Oregon State's defense is good, but they're not as good as Utah's. And based on that fact, I'm taking Utah to win this game. This will be another close one. This has that 27-20, 24-17 type feel to it. But I am going to take Utah because of that defense.
Yeah, this is another 50-50 type game, and it's huge in the Pac-10, Pac-12 standings. But as you said, Oregon State, that was a good battle that they had last week, and they kind of showed you that they could play. But we talked about DJ earlier, and I think Utah's defense is going to get some heat on him, and he'll make some mistakes. And then surprisingly, Utah playing very well with their backup quarterback. I think they'll be just physical enough to get this game done. Obviously, Corvallis is a tough place to play up there in Oregon, and the crowd will be into it, and it's going to be interesting. You said it's a Friday night game, so all eyes are going to be on this, and it'll be on national TV. But I still think that Utah will use this to get those style points that we talked about to kind of keep moving forward and see if they can get into that top 4 conversation.
Yeah, and if they get to 5-0 and they go back to back beating, UCLA and then Oregon State, Now you have to start talking about Utah in the national conversation about
Yeah.
what they might be able to accomplish. So, uh, next game we have is number 8 USC at Colorado. USC a 21.5 point favorite. I see you smiling. 21.5 point favorite on the road. Um, I said last week that Colorado was going to take it behind the woodshed last week, and they
Mhm.
did. Um, but Dion didn't back down from it. He said, we got our butts kicked. There's no excuses. We got to pick ourselves back up. We have to
Yeah.
get ready again. So, now you got Caleb Williams coming to town, and we know how Caleb Williams is playing this year to start the year. I don't know if Travis Hunter's going to be ready. Um, all things are pointing to the fact that he probably will miss a second straight week. Do I think Colorado will play better? Yes. USC doesn't have as good a defense as Oregon does, but I still think they get taken behind the woodshed. Do I think USC covers? I don't know. They didn't cover last week,
That's a
or they
lot
might
of
have covered that.
points.
It's a lot of points. Colorado at home. Um, this is actually this is actually an intriguing game. I want to see how Caleb Williams plays. Colorado can't play any worse. I'm going to say USC probably. This is like a 49 to like 27 type game for me.
Yeah, and we have our buddy Joey B showing all the celebrities that are going to be there. And that's what Dion's doing. He's keeping them in a conversation. I don't know if it's worth $2,300 per ticket, but he's got this team in the mix in terms of everybody's talking about him, and that's a great thing. And we know that it is all about recruiting, and he's going to use this kind of spurs next class. I think obviously Shador went out there and played as hard as he could, but against Oregon, but they just don't have the lines, as we said, the offensive line, the defensive line. And when I look at this one, I think that's where USC is going to dominate them. Obviously, Dion did. It will have these guys angry after that tough loss, and everybody's giving him his come up. It's like, ha ha, we told you so. But they're just going to keep playing. Don't forget they were a one-win team last year. I think they will battle in this one. As you said, maybe they get a backdoor touchdown or field goal to take those points and win it. In terms of the books, but I think that USC wins this one in dominant fashion.
Yeah, I just don't see any way Colorado's going to win. Um, then we have number 17, the Huskies traveling to Arizona to take on the Wildcats. Washington is an 18-point favorite on the road. Uh, Tell you what, Penix Jr. is playing out of his mind right now. Go take a look at his stats through the first 4 games. Or Arizona's 3-1, putting together a decent season so far, but Washington's just on another level. They have it on both sides of the ball. Arizona they'll score points because again, I think Utah has the best defense in the Pac-12 or Pac-0 as I like to call it right now. So, but I just don't see Washington has too many horses. They're in that. I tell you what, it's going to be a battle till the end in the Pac-12 with the way it's going right now, and of course Washington will want to throw up the style points. I just don't see any way Arizona wins this game. Do they cover? I don't know. It's an iffy spread for me, but I think Washington wins and they win big.
Yeah, and Penix Jr. is definitely firmly in the Heisman Trophy conversation. He may be the guy. You
Yeah.
always see a guy come out of nowhere, put up these big stats, and he's doing it on national TV, and everybody's watching him. And so I expect them to go in there and take care of business against the Arizona team that they're still kind of rebuilding, trying to find their way. It's not the Desert Swarm type days, and I think they're going to put up a nice number. And the thing is with Washington, that Apple Cup is looming. They definitely Washington State. That's going to be a huge game for them at the end of the season, and we'll see if Penix Jr. if they can get it done there. But I think this week they do take care of business.
And our man Joey B says Penix gets no love playing in the Northwest. Well, I'll tell you what, the way the Pac-12 keeps playing, he'll get the attention. Believe me. Um, then we have number 6 Penn State at Northwestern. We saw the dismantling of Iowa last week. I did not see that coming. I thought that would be a defensive battle. Penn State finally put that game together, both offensively and defensively. You were waiting for it to all come together. The whiteout. We see where this Iowa program is now. Penn State continues to roll, and the way they're playing right now, if they can continue to play with that or play like that, Michigan and Ohio State better watch out. So, Penn State favored by 27 on the road. Northwestern's got it back to 2-2, but just too much Penn State. We saw that what that defense is capable of. They seem to be balanced offensively now. I think Northwestern's in for a long night. I think Penn State gets blown out. I think Penn State covers that 27. Penn State huge.
Yeah, that's a lot of points, 27 and a half. We'll see if they're able to do it. But were just so dominant against Iowa. As you said, I just thought, okay, this game would be a lot closer because they always played Iowa close. And last year's game with Northwestern, I was actually there. It was raining very bad. So, well, hopefully, if it's a dry track, I think that Penn State will be able to get this done. They can't look ahead, though, the next couple of weeks, and because that Ohio State game is looming. But they got to take care of business against Northwestern, and I expect Singleton and the rest of that offense to get the job done.
Yeah. This is a sneaky game right here. We've got number 24 Kansas, undefeated, at number 3 Texas, undefeated. Now, everybody remembers Kansas started off last season gangbusters too. They were 5-0, and then they lost, I think it was like 5 out of their last 6 games. So Texas is favored by 16.5 at home. This is one of those games that Texas cannot afford to look ahead to what's looming with Oklahoma. Kansas, gritty team. I've seen them. They don't do anything spectacular. They just play to their strengths, both offensively and defensively. Yeah. These are the types of games, though, for Texas now. You're ranked 3rd nationally. You've got a nationally ranked team coming to your house in Kansas. These are the types of games where you sort of have to lay it on thick and you have to be dominant. I think Sarkisian will have them ready. I think Kansas will make it close for a while, maybe a half, but I think Texas in the second half pulls away. Again, the spread 16.5. I'm not liking what Texas has done with the spread this year, but I'll say Texas makes a statement with this game, and I'll say they win this game by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think Sark has yours and the rest of these guys ready to go, and Kansas may not be as good as their record. Their record may be a little better than they are. They've had some easier games earlier in the season. They had some good scheduling, and they're stepping up in class here. And the thing is with Texas, they always seem to let down though in certain games, especially when they're looking ahead to that big Oklahoma battle. So I think though at home they're going to be able to take care of business, and I think they will be able to cover that 16.5. It may be a little tight, maybe a field goal needed at the end, but I think Texas gets it done. And then Kansas, we say, okay, nice season, but you're still a basketball school.
Yeah. There we have number 2 Michigan at Nebraska. Michigan's favored by 17 on the road. Again, Matt Rule trying to establish his own culture at Nebraska. It's going to take a long while. Michigan continues to roll. They put together a good effort last week. On the road, Nebraska, I'm sure the Husker faithful will be pumped for this game. It's a 3:30 kickoff start. Again, the emotion of the game, everything going on in the first half. I think Nebraska hangs around for a while, but there's just too much Michigan. The only thing that worries me about Michigan is the running game has not developed the way it did last year. So they're going to have to try and be more balanced. But I just think in the end there's too many big dogs up front for Michigan. I think Michigan pulls away. They'll probably cover the 17. This has a feel of like a 38 to 17 type game for me.
Yeah, and the thing is with Michigan, they've had these slow starts, and it's like, okay, they need to wake up early in this one and show that they're a dominant team because, let's face it, Nebraska's quarterback is a former walk-on. They had to go to him. He's played solid the last couple of weeks against some FCS type teams, and this is going to be a big step up. And Michigan has to show their pedigree. A team that was in the Final Four last year, and you're going to see McCarthy get his thing done throwing the football, but you want to see Quorum and Edwards also. You'd like to see each of them get 100 yards rushing against Nebraska because their defense is more quick than anything, and they should be able to blast holes anyway.
Yeah, so I did Michigan rolls. And then the final game on that we have the number one Georgia Bulldogs quietly 4-0, traveling to Auburn 3-1. Georgia favored by 14.5. You know, Auburn did not look good last week against Texas A&M. A lot of people were not on Auburn last week. I didn't see it. I didn't think it was going to be like that. Georgia just continues to do Georgia type things. Do I think they'll roll? No. Do I think Auburn's going to come to play? I think maybe Auburn last week got caught looking ahead to this week, and they paid for it. But again, this game has that type of feel of Auburn will probably hang around for the first half, but then I think Georgia in the trenches takes over in the second half. Again, this is the kind of game it's got like a 35-20 or 38-17 type feel to it. But I do think Georgia will pull away in the second half.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the thing is, I bet Auburn wishes they had Nix back. Nix played so well for Oregon, and he's doing great things up there. But when I look at Georgia, it's all about their defense, and their defense, it's just got athletes all over the place in terms of their secondary and their defensive line getting pressure on a quarterback. So I think Auburn will make mistakes, and then that'll turn this game around, and then Kirby will be real happy with his team's effort, and they'll get ready for the rest of the SEC games. But I think Georgia wins this one and wins it big. They go on the road and make a statement.
So before we get to our against the spread picks, we've got about 9 minutes here. I want to get your take on something that I saw, and I actually sent this to Angel about. I think it was the Oregon State AD or commissioner talking about relegation for conferences. It went like in soccer, in European soccer, where at the end of the year, the bottom three teams get right. So,
right. Interesting.
Oregon State and Washington State, who are only going to be the two Pac-12 teams left, they are supposedly talking to the Mountain West about combining all those teams into one conference, and then they maybe bringing some of the other schools in, like North Dakota State, South Dakota. And what they're talking about is having a 24-team league, and you're going to have different conferences or divisions, levels.
Yeah.
And if you're in the top division and you go down, the bottom three will get relegated. Would somebody please explain to me what the hell is going on? Because conference realignment and teams defecting, and now we got ADs and commissioners talking about relegation. What the hell are we talking about here?
Yeah, that's a smaller conference trying to do whatever they can to stay, in the picture. That let everybody talk about them, and that's going to be tough to sell to alumni. And it sounds good, like, oh, okay, well, we'll fight our way to the top, and we'll prove that we belong, and every game will matter, and each season will matter. But I think it's kind of a way to get cheap heat. You know what I mean? Like relegation, I just don't see if it'll work. If that was the case, you look at like a team like we were talking about Vanderbilt earlier. They'd be regulated to that second tier division forever, and I think it kind of takes away from the rivalries. That even though a team may be down, Kentucky's always going to get up to play Tennessee. They're natural rivalries, and you want to see those teams just play each other and kind of work itself out in terms of the pecking order of a conference. So, you feel bad that for these teams that are kind of left over from the Pac-12, but maybe they need to kind of look around, shop, and look for better situations because the Pac-12 is on top right now, and I'm sure some of these other conferences would love to have those guys.
Yeah, and Joey B says, yeah, it might be gimmicky, yes, but people would watch towards the end of the season. Joey B, I don't know what elevation you're at right now, but I think maybe some of the brain cells, may be going. I don't know what's going on out in Colorado, but I think it's a complete horrendous idea. Yes, it's gimmicky. It doesn't make any sense. I don't see the value in it. Just stick to what has worked. And I know, like I said, Oregon State, Washington State, the Mountain West Conference, they're all going to um, combine to make one conference. And I don't know when North Dakota State and South Dakota, like maybe Montana, would come into the
Yeah.
mix. But
Wow.
yeah,
And for
that's what
those schools, that's a big step up in competition for them, and I'd say why not leave it the way it is, and then they kind of have that big conference championship game sitting out there at the end of the season, and then maybe possibly a team could have, if their record's good enough, they can bring up the recognition of their conference by jumping into that conversation when the team or take more teams to the national title race.
All right. So what games are you looking at against the spread this week, my friend? What are your winners?
Ooh, I was looking at. I think that Michigan definitely is going to be able to cover that 17 and a half against Nebraska. Nebraska, I just don't kind of believe what they're, they've had some difficulty. I watched a lot of their first couple games and they turned the football over in opportune times. Matt Rule's trying to establish things there, but I definitely think that they will be able to win that one by 17 and a half. Last week, this was a team that I talked about, and I said Army was going to cover against them. It was close. They got a touchdown at the very end to cover the points. But Syracuse, I watched a lot of that game, and Syracuse is playing very well. They're at home in the Carrier Dome again. They're 6.5 point favorites versus Clemson, and I'm going to say I'm going to take Syracuse outright to win this one. They're also undefeated, so they want their respect. And we talked about Clemson kind of falling down. I think Syracuse is going to be able to win this game in a dome, and it's going to be rocking. So I'll go with them there, plus the points. So that's outright. And I'm just looking at the lines here. One more. This is an interesting one. I think Indiana is they're getting 14 points. They kept it close last week, and I think they're better than a 14-point underdog against Maryland on the road. So I'll go with Indiana plus the points here. I think this is a lot closer game, and it'll be a good watch.
All right. The ones I was looking at and the ones I think I'm going to throw out there. I've got Fresno State minus the 24.5 against Nevada. Nevada's just they're not a good football team. Fresno State has it rolling right now. I think Fresno State rolls in that one. They cover that spread. I've got Kentucky minus the one. I know you like the Florida Gators. I just think Kentucky, the way they're constructed right now, and I'm a Gator fan, but I've got to be realistic. I just think Kentucky gets it done. Miami of Ohio minus 14 and a half. I believe they play Kent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Kent is not a good football team out of the MAC. Miami of Ohio right now is doing some good things. So I think Miami of Ohio will cover the 14 and a half. I also went with Mizzou, Vandy. Vandy. Anybody who's watched Vandy this year, if you saw any of the Kentucky game last year or last week, they just got destroyed. I think Mizzou would cover the 13 and a half. Also went with Oregon minus the 27 against Arizona. I know they're coming off the win last week. It was emotional for them, but they just seem like they seem to have it going now, and I don't think Arizona can stop them. And Oregon has the defense. Joey B says Neff just chose the Wildcats while wearing a Florida Gator T-shirt. Gainesville fans coming for Neff. Hey, you got to be realistic. You know what I mean? So I also have Penn State minus the 27 against Northwestern. Northwestern's bad. Washington minus the 18. They're the ones that play Arizona, I believe. I think Washington plays Arizona. And then I've got UNLV minus the 11. I think I like what I've seen out of UNLV. So before we leave here in the last minute or so, what are you looking for this week?
Well, I'm looking at it. The slate is not as sexy as last week, but you want to see these teams kind of get that separation. The real contenders and the pretenders. There are a few good matchups. Hopefully, Colorado puts up a better effort, and Dion doesn't have to eat as much crow. But I think USC we'll put them on there. So hopefully Colorado kind of stays in the game because everybody's going to be watching that one. And definitely, I want to see Oklahoma, protecting themselves and getting ready for their next big game coming up against Texas.
Yeah, and I want to see how some of these teams respond after losing. I want to see how Notre Dame responds. I want to see how Oregon State responds. So some of the teams that lost close ones last week, I want to see how they respond. Again, Joey B, thanks for tuning in. You take care too. Thanks for the props. Order some penguin pretzels. So LV, thanks again for joining me.
Oh
Thanks
yeah.
to Angel, producing and everything. Everyone, tell your friends, tell your pets, tell your neighbors, about the show. We try and be as informative as we can. That's all we do is talk college football Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 7:30. So with that, LV, thank you. Angel, thank you. We'll see you next week in the line of scrimmage.